Everyone thought she had lost her mind. Men with power, men with wealth, men who could change her life in an instant, all stood before her, waiting for an answer. Each one had something to offer: a mansion, a luxury car, a life of endless comfort. Yet in the end, she rejected them all for one man, a man who had nothing but dreams and empty pockets. The news spread like wildfire. People whispered in shock, laughed in disbelief. How can someone so beautiful, so intelligent, throw away her future for a man who can barely afford his next meal? Even her family couldn't understand. Her mother begged, her father warned, her friends mocked her. But Amara didn't care. She had made her choice. She chose Chidi. He wasn't a man with wealth, but he had a heart full of love, and she believed in him. She saw something in him that no one else did: a fire, a hunger, a promise that one day he would make something of himself. But promises don't pay rent. Dreams don't buy food. And love alone cannot fill an empty stomach. The day she announced her decision, the last millionaire who had proposed to her, Tunde, stood in front of her with a confident smile. He was tall, rich, and powerful, the kind of man every woman prayed for. His voice was calm but carried weight. "Amara," he said, "I can give you anything you want. A house in the city, a business in your name, cars, vacations, everything." "I don't need all that," she replied. Tunde smirked. "You think this love of yours will last? You think this broke man will ever give you the life you deserve? Mark my words, one day you'll regret this decision, and when you do, don't come crawling back." She didn't flinch. "I won't." With that, she walked away, leaving behind a world of luxury, stepping into an uncertain future with a man who had nothing but love and ambition. The wedding was simple. No grand halls, no expensive rings, just a small gathering of close friends and a pastor who smiled as he joined them in holy matrimony. Some people didn't even bother to show up. Her own family refused to attend, too ashamed to witness what they called a disaster waiting to happen. The first few months were beautiful. Waking up beside the man she loved, laughing over small meals, dreaming about the future. Chidi would hold her hands and say, "One day, Amara, I will make you proud. One day, you won't regret choosing me." But as time passed, reality started to bite. The small one-room apartment they lived in started to feel even smaller. Bills piled up, job opportunities never came. Chidi tried everything. He applied for jobs, worked as a delivery man, even tried starting a small business that failed before it even began. And through it all, Amara stood by his side. But the world wasn't kind. Her mother called one day. "Amara, I hope you're enjoying your suffering. I warned you, but you didn't listen." Her old friends sent messages. "Still living in that tiny house? Or have you finally realized your mistake?" Even strangers on the street looked at her with pity. "Such a waste of beauty," they whispered. Chidi saw it too. He saw the way she forced a smile when she was sad. He saw the way she pretended everything was fine when it wasn't. And it crushed him. One night as they lay in bed, he turned to her. "Amara," he whispered, "if you want to leave, I won't stop you. You deserve better." Her heart broke at his words. "Chidi, I didn't marry you for money. I married you because I believe in you. I still do." He held her hands tightly, but she could feel the doubt in his grip. The next day, she received an unexpected visitor. Tunde. He stood outside her house, leaning against his sleek black car, looking at her with an amused expression. "I warned you," he said. "Now look at you. Struggling, suffering. Is this the life you chose?" Amara's stomach tightened. He smirked. "I'll give you one last chance. Walk away from this misery. Come with me, and you'll never have to worry about money again." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had made her choice once. But now, as she stood there, looking at the reality of her life, a painful truth settled in. Love was beautiful, but love didn't put food on the table. Her hands trembled. Her mind raced. And then in that moment, something happened that changed everything. Amara's fingers twitched. Her breath caught in her throat. Tunde's words hung in the air, heavy like a storm cloud. "Walk away from this misery." He stood there, confident, sure that she would break, that she would finally admit she had made a mistake, that she would run into his arms, desperate to escape the life she had chosen. Amara swallowed hard. She had loved Chidi with all her heart, but love wasn't feeding her. Love wasn't paying the rent. Love wasn't stopping the whispers, the laughter, the mockery. For the first time since she married him, doubt crept into her heart. Tunde watched her closely. He saw the hesitation in her eyes. A slow smirk stretched across his face. "I'll take care of you, Amara. Just say the word." She should have walked away. She should have told him no. But instead, she just stood there. Her silence was an answer in itself. The front door creaked open behind her. Chidi, his eyes met hers, and in that moment, she felt exposed. She felt guilty. He had heard everything. Tunde chuckled and shook his head. "Even your husband knows I'm right. Look at him, Amara. Look at his face. He knows he can't give you what I can." Chidi's jaw clenched. His fists curled at his sides. He was a man drowning in his own failures, watching the woman he loved being offered a lifeline by another man. A man who had everything he didn't. He didn't beg her to stay. He didn't plead or try to convince her. Instead, he turned away and walked back inside the house. Amara's heart twisted. Tunde sighed. "You're wasting your time with him, Amara. Think about it. You're too beautiful, too smart to be struggling like this. You deserve more." Her hands trembled, and then she turned and walked inside. He shutting the door behind her. Tunde's voice was muffled through the wood. "This is your last chance, Amara. Don't say I didn't warn you." She leaned against the door, breathing hard. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Inside, Chidi sat at the small wooden table, staring at the floor. His expression was unreadable, his silence louder than any scream. For the first time in a long time, the house felt colder. Amara walked toward him slowly, her footsteps hesitant. "Chidi?" He didn't look up. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "Say it," he finally muttered. She blinked. "Say what?" "Say you regret marrying me," he said, his voice low, almost defeated. Her throat tightened. "I don't," she whispered. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You hesitated, Amara. You hesitated." Silence. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, but she couldn't, because he wasn't wrong. Tears stung her eyes. "Chidi, I love you." "Love won't put food on the table," he said, his voice heavy with frustration. "Love won't stop people from laughing at you. Love won't stop you from regretting this life." Her heart broke at the pain in his eyes. "I need to fix this," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "I need to fix my life. I need to be a man who can take care of his wife." "Chidi, I didn't marry you for money." "But you hesitated, Amara." His voice was gentle now, but it carried so much weight. "You hesitated because you are suffering, and I caused that. You." She wanted to tell him it wasn't true. But was it? Had she made a mistake? That night they lay in bed, but the distance between them felt like an ocean. Chidi held her hand, but his grip was weak, as if he was already letting go. The next morning she woke up to an empty bed and a note. "I love you, Amara, but I need to become a better man. I'll come back for you when I am." Her hands shook as she read it over and over. He was gone. Panic seized her chest. She ran outside, searching for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Days passed. Then weeks. No calls, no messages. Chidi had disappeared. Her world collapsed. People laughed at her. "Even the broke man left you?" Tunde found out and came to her again. "You see, you should have come with me." But she turned him down. Because despite everything, she still believed in Chidi. Months passed. She struggled alone, but she refused to give up on him. Then one day, something happened that no one saw coming. Amara had learned to live with silence. The silence of an empty house, the silence of unanswered prayers, the silence of a heart waiting, but not knowing if the wait would ever end. Chidi had vanished without a trace. No calls, no letters, nothing. At first, she believed he would return in a few days. Then she thought maybe a few weeks. But as the months dragged on, hope began to fade. Her days became a routine of survival. She took up small jobs to keep herself afloat, cleaning houses, selling clothes at the market, even working at a local restaurant washing dishes. It was humiliating. The same people who once admired her now sneered when they saw her. See how she ended up? She could have been living in a mansion by now. All that beauty wasted on suffering. Tunde never stopped coming around. He always appeared with expensive gifts, trying to lure her into his world of comfort. "Amara, this life is not for you," he would say. "Look at yourself. You're struggling for a man who abandoned you. How much longer will you do this?" But every time she turned him down. She wasn't a fool. She knew Tunde didn't love her. He only wanted to prove that he could win, that he could break her, and she refused to be broken. But deep inside, she was tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of believing. tired of holding on to a man who might never return. Then one evening, everything changed. She was walking home from work exhausted when she heard someone call her name, a familiar voice. She turned and her breath caught in her throat. Chidi. Her heart slammed against her chest. For a moment she thought she was imagining him, but he was real. He stood a few feet away, looking different, stronger, more confident, and he wasn't alone. Behind him were two black SUVs, the kind only rich men drove. She stared at him, her mind struggling to understand. He wasn't the same man who had left her months ago. His clothes were sharp, expensive. His posture was different. He carried himself like a man who had seen the world and conquered it. Her voice trembled. Chidi? A slow smile spread across his face. Did you think I wouldn't come back for you? Tears blurred her vision. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or slap him for leaving her without a word. She ran to him, her fists pounding against his chest. You left me, she sobbed. You just disappeared. He caught her wrist gently, his grip firm but warm. I had to, Amara. I had to become the man you deserve. Her body shook with emotions. Anger, relief, love. Where have you been? She whispered. His eyes darkened. I went to build a future for us. He took her hands in his, rubbing them softly. When I left, I had nothing. No money, no job, just a promise to myself that I wouldn't come back until I had changed my life. I worked day and night, I failed many times, but I never gave up. And now, Amara, he glanced at the SUVs, I am no longer a broke man. Her head spun. What are you saying? I own a company now, a business I built from the ground up. It wasn't easy, but I made it. And I came back for you. Amara's breath shuddered. She had spent months suffering, barely getting by, but now he was back, and he was a different man. And yet, something inside her hesitated. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Why did you leave me to suffer alone? His jaw tightened. Because I didn't want you to wait for me out of pity. I wanted you to choose me, not because I needed help, but because you still believed in me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had believed. Even when the world mocked her, even when everyone told her she was foolish, she had believed. And now, here he was. He took a deep breath. Come with me, Amara. Let me take care of you. She hesitated, not because she didn't love him, but because, what if this changed everything? What if the man standing before her was no longer the Chidi she fell in love with? But before she could answer, a car screeched to a stop beside them. Tunde, his face twisted in disbelief. His eyes darted between Amara and Chidi. You, he spat. You think you can just come back after abandoning her? After leaving her in misery? Chidi's expression remained calm. This is between me and my wife. Tunde scoffed. Wife? You mean the woman you left to suffer? He turned to Amara. I was there when he wasn't. I offered you everything, and you still chose to wait for him. Amara's hands clenched. Because I love him. Tunde's eyes darkened. And what if he leaves you again? What if all of this is just temporary? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Don't be a fool, Amara. He walked away once. What makes you think he won't do it again? Silence. Chidi exhaled slowly. Then, without breaking eye contact with Tunde, he pulled something out of his pocket. A ring. Not just any ring, an expensive, beautiful diamond ring that sparkled under the streetlights. Amara gasped. Chidi knelt before her. Marry me again, Amara. Her heart pounded. I left to become a man worthy of you, he continued. Now, I want to start again. This time, with no struggles, no pain. Just us. Will you take this second chance with me? Tunde's face twisted in rage. Amara, don't do this. The whole world seemed to stop. Her answer would change everything. And then, she opened her mouth to speak. The night air was thick with tension. Amara's heart pounded as she stared at the ring in Chidi's hand. The diamond sparkled under the streetlights, a symbol of everything he had become. She had spent months longing for him, praying for his return. Now he was here, kneeling before her, asking her to take him back. But was she ready? Tunde's sharp voice cut through the silence. Amara, don't be a fool. His eyes burned with desperation. This man left you to suffer. He abandoned you with nothing. And now, because he's suddenly rich, you're going to forgive him? Chidi's jaw tightened, but he remained kneeling. He didn't even spare Tunde a glance. His focus was only on Amara. She swallowed hard. Tunde was right about one thing. Chidi had left her when she needed him most. But he had also come back. He had fought to change his life, to become a man she could rely on. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest. Then she looked into Chidi's eyes. They were the same eyes she had fallen in love with years ago. The same eyes that once held dreams of a better future, dreams that they had built together. And in that moment, she knew. She knew that despite everything, the pain, the waiting, the suffering, her heart still belonged to him. Tears welled in her eyes as she slowly reached out. Her fingers brushed against his, and she took the ring. A gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered around them. Tunde's face twisted in rage. "Amara, no! You're making a mistake!" She turned to him, her voice calm but firm. "The only mistake would be choosing a man who never truly loved me." Tunde's eyes flashed with anger. "I could give you everything. A life without struggles. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." She shook her head. "But I would never have love." For the first time, Tunde looked defeated. He took a step back, his lips pressed into a thin line. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed back to his car. The sound of the engine roaring to life filled the air, and then he was gone. Amara turned back to Chidi, her hands trembling. "Don't ever leave me again," she whispered. Chidi stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Never," he murmured into her hair. "I promise." A new chapter of their lives had begun. The wedding was the talk of the entire city. People who once mocked Amara now watched in stunned silence as she walked down the aisle in a breathtaking gown, her beauty unmatched. Chidi stood at the altar, waiting for her with tears in his eyes. The same man who had once struggled to afford a meal was now a successful businessman, standing tall and proud, ready to take the woman he loved as his wife again. As she reached him, he took her hands, his grip firm and full of warmth. The officiant smiled. "Do you, Chidi, take Amara to be your wife, to love and cherish her for all the days of your life?" Chidi's voice was steady. "With all my heart, yes." The officiant turned to Amara. "And do you, Amara, take Chidi to be your husband, to stand by his side through all seasons of life?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted into cheers. It was a love story that defied all odds. But life had one more twist waiting for them. Weeks after their wedding, Chidi took Amara to their new home, a mansion that overlooked the city, a place he had built with his own hands. "You never have to struggle again," he told her. She smiled, leaning into him. "As long as I have you, I have everything." And she meant it. But one evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Chidi's phone rang. His face darkened when he saw the caller ID. "Who is it?" Amara asked. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was urgent. "Chidi, you need to leave the city. Now." Amara's heart clenched. "What's happening?" Chidi's hand tightened around the phone. "It's Tunde," he said grimly, "and he's not done with us yet."